Thank you for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Thank you for joining me. Why should Christians support the state of Israel? There's been a great deal of controversy recently about the so-called Schofield Bible interpretation, with some conspiracy theories that have been promulgated by people like James Perloff, and I think Michael Jones might be on that one as well, which say that Schofield was a scoundrel who was set up by a Jewish banker. The big Jewish family, I think the Ottomeyers or something. I don't know about that. I'm not saying that's not possible. Something that I'm beginning to look into. Maybe we'll do a show on it. Someone wants to recommend a guest who can talk about that. I'm all ears. But I want to deal with why I think Christians should support Israel today. And I'm going to pass on a discussion about this from a religious standpoint, because, again, my knowledge is not that deep. If someone wants to recommend an expert, I'm all ears. Please do. With regard to the Christian understanding of the importance, and my understanding is that this is the case, the importance of the ingathering of the exiles and the reestablishment of the Jewish Commonwealth as the means by which we will see a messianic age entered into, the second coming of Christ, that these conditions have to be met. It's my understanding that this is in the book of Revelations. There are other references to it in the New Testament, but again, I'm not an expert. Please inform me. We should all talk about this, that being myself and our audience here, and see if we can learn about that, because I'm, again, not adept. I haven't read the entire New Testament. I've read in it, and haven't read the commentary, so I don't know. But I would argue, putting that aside, and that is my assumption, that it is part of Christianity. By the way, it's also part of Islam. The Jewish understanding is that the covenant of Israel is forever. This was articulated by none other than Jesus himself in the book of Acts, and in the book of Matthew, he's quoted as noting this, which does contradict the replacement theology. I'll grant you that. I mean, I tend to adhere to the dual covenant idea, that the Jewish covenant is forever, and remains forever, and that the Jewish people in every generation, at least a remnant of us, have tried to uphold it and have sought to help lead the world toward knowing God, and thus ushering in the Messianic age, and that we do believe that Israel is part of that, and that Jerusalem is a part of it, and that all of these things have been fulfilled in our own time, which we view as miraculous. I personally do think it's a miracle that Israel has come to existence, and that Israel has obtained sovereignty in extremely adversarial conditions. Which brings me to another point of why Christians ought to support Israel. Israel is defying, just by its existence, the radical and fundamental elements of Islam. Now, I'm not here to condemn Muslims. I feel bad for most Muslims in those countries who live under this totalitarian, putrid system that executes women if they're seen out in public with another man, or if they're, honor killings and child brides, and throwing gay people off the roof, and, murdering those who leave the faith. I mean, these are very oppressive systems, quite frankly. And the very existence of Israel as a non-Muslim state, let alone Jewish state, it defies that, and it has everything to do with their refusal to recognize Israel. They feel righteous in fighting the infidel, whether it be Jew or Christian or anyone else. And they don't have any moral or ethical. I'm talking here about the radicals. I'm not talking about everyday Muslims here. Thank goodness we have America where Muslims can, be peaceful and can reject these aspects of their own religion, even though I'd urge them to come forward and recognize it. But the radical faith of Islam, which is very much, in case we're getting on our high horses, very consonant with communism, which is a Western product, that there is no morality, there are no ethics, everything is victory for the cause, and that anyone that stands in the way of that victory is not even human. I mean, they don't deserve to be considered. Certainly how communism operated when it murdered hundreds of millions of people in those countries, and why the American left, which has internalized communism, looked the other way. After all, it's progressive, right? They don't have any morality. They don't have any soul. They don't have any ethics. They're empty shells. They're radicals. And by its very existence, that is what Israel is defying. And it's doing so in a very effective way, in that it is showing the Muslim world that they're wrong. And that's why they despise Israel. The Palestinian Arabs who live in Israel and in the administered territories, they know in their heart of hearts that they're better off in Israel because they're free, because they're Western, because they're forward-looking, they have business, they're operating in a free market condition, they are wealthier, they are more peaceful, they're more progressive in the real sense than their fellow compatriot Arabs in surrounding countries, let alone other Islamic countries. They know this. And this is why the Arabs hate and fear Israel, because they're afraid that Israel, by example, is going to wake up their own populations to their true nature as individuals that live in a free world. Because Islam is the opposite. It is an oppressive, brutal, authoritarian, frankly, communistic system. Israel's defying that. And in that sense, Israel is very much in sync with Christianity, which also emphasizes the right of the individual to have a personal relationship with God through their belief in the Messiah, Jesus. That is the opposite of the Islamic/communist idea, which holds brute human power and collectivism as the ultimate virtue, and which subsumes and suppresses individual rights, individual identity. They don't know who they are. They're just there as appendages, as servants of some greater gauzy cause. In the case of Islam, that is one world under the scimitar, one world government under Islam to reflect the one God. That's what they believe in. In the case of communism, it's world revolution and in a collectivized universe world where man becomes, part of an ant colony. We all are equal and we all are working for some kind of a gauzy greater good, but we've surrendered who we are. We've surrendered our consciousness in the process. This runs completely contrary to the Jewish and the Christian idea, which is, in the case of Christianity, the individual has a personal relationship, a voluntary relationship with God as an individual. And in the case of the Jew, the individual is part of this covenant that is to serve God and to teach awareness of God and to try to know God and teach that to the world. We have a common bond in that way. And that's what Israel stands for. It is a step in that direction. That doesn't mean every Israeli believes this, but in their heart of hearts, most Israelis know that there is something more significant to Zionism, to Israel as a national movement, than simply being a national state, which is very important. There is a spiritual component. There is this idea that the peoples are setting up a new society, a commonwealth that is holier out of observance and out of actions, both for themselves and for the rest of the world, and that knows God and as such leads by example to all of the other nations to know God. So I think that both Jews and Christians have a stake in supporting Israel and in supporting Israel's mission and in trying to help wake up Israel to its own mission, which I think most Israelis do know, at least subconsciously, to wake up and understand their special role in the advancement of history. I also think that Israel represents sovereignty. Sovereignty is a biblical concept. I could go into a long story of how this idea was established in the Bible and right up till today. It also recognizes property, another biblical concept that goes back to when Abraham purchased a plot of land in Hebron for the purpose of burying his wife and eventually his son and his wife and grandson and his wife and himself. This is the cave of Machpelah. It's in Hebron. And the Bible recounts a scene by which Abraham very publicly purchased that cave from Ephraim the Hittite, I believe it was, and did so in public with hundreds of witnesses on both sides in a voluntary exchange for a set price that was agreed upon. In a way, it's the world's first real estate transaction, one that's still valid. It and that the exchange was made. Abraham gave Abimelech or whoever the king was the silver. They then had a celebration. They had a big barbecue, apparently, and they left in comity and harmony, and that the purchase was done and recorded with a deed in public. That established the concept of private property and its importance in history. That is a Jewish and a Christian concept. It runs contrary to Islam, by the way, and it runs contrary to communism, which rejects this natural and important institution. Israel sets an example to the world for what a small sovereign nation is and can be. There's all this cockamamie anti-Jewish conspiracy theories about the Jews wanting to have a world government. And I don't doubt that Jews are part of that. There's certainly, you could find Jewish globalists. And unfortunately, painfully and shamefully, there are too many of them involved in that enterprise. But they are running against Judaism. Judaism teaches sovereignty. It teaches the importance of nationalism and of nationhood. And Israel represents that to the T. And as such, it serves as a light unto other peoples, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, any other peoples who want to assert their national sovereignty. So for that reason, we should support Israel. And finally, Israel is a relatively free market nation with moral constraints built into that free market. It represents a beginning of a reestablishment of a type of capitalism that ought to exist more in its imperfect state, and that is a departure from the radical free market capitalism that was developed by the British and Adam Smith, where property, where everything is there's no government interference, there's no moral constraints, everything is just the free hand of the market. Israel represents capitalism with government oversight and with Jewish morals in all of it, even though it's an imperfect system. And that is an example that all nations ought to support and develop in their own communities. So I could go on. I don't want to belabor the point too much right now. I would simply point out that for these reasons, Christians ought to support the state of Israel. And also, we should look at the enemies of Israel. The enemies of Israel are two groups: radical Islam and its leftist enablers. Not normative Islam. I think normative Islam and normative Muslims do support Israel, but they can't because of their radical ideologies baked into their religion and because of their radical leaders who are terrorists and who will try to kill them if they support Israel. And they are enabled by the international left, who seeks to erode sovereignty, who seeks to erode faith in God, who seek the nth colony, the world, the equality of the world. This very demented and ugly and lethal and poisonous wizardry, if you will, that the left is into. So they find common cause with radical Islam, and that's what they're doing. So check out Israel's enemies, know their enemies, and contrast that with who you are and what you believe in. Anyway, so that's it in a nutshell. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please subscribe to my station. Have a great afternoon.